The Thunder has a victory. Can they get some more? I'm Barry Trammell along with Thunder writer Maddie Lee. We're in the Oklahoman studios a night after the Thunder beats Indiana 107-99, a much-needed victory. This is Thunder Thursday, and come Friday, the Nuggets are in town, Maddie. This is a Thunder team that has been playing very poorly, but played well against Indiana. Can they keep it up? This is the first of 5 straight home games, a chance to put together a winning streak. Can they do it?
Well, the thing is they need to, right? Whether or not they can, we'll see. We already saw them have one of those big wins where they're in Toronto, they snap a losing streak. It seems like that's a turning point. But the Thunder have a bad habit of, after games like that, sliding into all their worst tendencies. And we saw that in Memphis. And so this is another game where it's like, okay, they bounce back from Memphis. They've got 2 wins in the last 3 games. That's better at least than the 2 4-game losing streaks we've seen since the break. And those home games really do play to their advantage, although now they have to prove that they can actually win against teams that they need to win against. They've played well against teams that are really good competition. It's the other ones that they seem to have weird trouble with.
Yeah, this is an interesting stretch. Indiana and Denver Friday night, really good teams, and then 2 very winnable games, Dallas and the Lakers, followed by sort of a team in the middle, Detroit. This Thunder team has been very streaky all year. Start 0-4, then get really good, get up within a game of first place, fall back a little bit, then go on another stretch, surge going into the All-Star break. Since the All-Star break, though, this has been an elongated slump. I mean, I think 6-12 in 18-game stretch. Is it too late in the year for the Thunder to make another big reversal and start playing really well again? If they can, all of a sudden the season looks different.
Right. Well, I think they kind of lulled us into a false sense of security in that really long winning streak because they played so well in January and February, and it seemed like, hey, maybe this is just who they are now. They're shooting the 3 really well, and when that happens for a few weeks, you're like, okay, whatever, it's just one of those weeks. For some reason, everyone's on at the same time. But when you put that together for 2 months, suddenly you start thinking like maybe this is just who they are. Then they proved us wrong. They are a streaky team. We've seen that recently. If they can flip that switch and finish up, they have everything working in their favor to be able to finish strong. We've talked about how the end of their schedule, not just because of those home games, but even when they're playing really good teams, they're good teams that probably will have, the 1 seed in the East locked down or whatever they're fighting for locked down, and they'll be resting guys. They won't need to be playing that game really strong to get anything that they want in postseason. And so those are games when they might let down. So everything's in the Thunder's advantage to go on another streak here. They've just got to make whatever that mental flip is.
Well, let's go back to the Indiana game. What did you like about the Pacer game? Thunder's down 9 at halftime, and then goes on the 24-0 run that's the Thunder at its best really all season for about 6 minutes. What did you like about that Indiana game?
I really like their defensive effort, and we saw a preview of that the last time that they played, where first half against Indiana, in Indiana, was incredible defensively for the Thunder, and they lost in that 3rd quarter when they started fouling way too much. They come back, they know that not fouling, is a focus in this game, and they do a great job at staying disciplined, not fouling, and then they're able to, even after only scoring 16 points in the 2nd quarter, buckling down, playing really, really good defense in the 3rd quarter, holding the Pacers to just 15 points, not letting that, the swing that went the other way, get them into a rut, come back and do it to their identity with solid defense.
Well, lots of things to like on this game on the Pacers. Steven Adams seemed to have a revival. Steven's not been playing well for the last month. He looks worn down to me. He looked revived last night against a team that really stretches somebody like Steven Adams because he had to go against Miles Turner, who's a very mobile, versatile big guy, plus Sabonis who's really good in the post, and Adams had maybe his best game of the season, 25 points and double-digit rebounds and one foul, just played tremendously. Jeremy Grant had a wonderful game. It looked like this was a game where the Thunder didn't have to have Westbrook and Paul George carry the load. Is this sustained effort? Jeremy Grant's been playing well for a long time.
Yeah.
We saw Adams join him again. Can we expect that to continue, or is this just sort of an uprising on a temporary basis for particularly Adams?
I think it's not necessarily going to continue. Certainly not at this level for Adams for the rest of the season. It was really nice to see him playing well because he really hasn't since the All-Star break. What the Thunder has been doing on the positive side recently is other guys, like you mentioned, who aren't Russell Westbrook, who aren't Paul George, have been stepping up. Not necessarily the same guys every night. The other night, you saw Dennis Schroeder put together 2 really good games in a row. He was not good against the Pacers, but he had 2 games right before that when he was really good. At the same time, you had Terrence Ferguson starting to hit threes again, and he's been good at mixing in, driving the basket some. His three-point shooting hasn't been nearly as good as it was during that winning streak, and that good stretch in January and February when he was just shooting unbelievably. He's a young player. Those peaks and valleys are expected, but you've seen Jeremy Grant put together some really good, really all season. He's been very consistent. He's shooting 3 super well since the All-Star break, and the Thunder needs guys to continue to keep stepping up, even if it's not Steven Adams every night, if it's just a couple other guys, especially in that starting lineup, stepping up and taking some of the pressure off of Paul George and Russell Westbrook, but Paul George especially, because teams are just throwing double teams at him, and if that works and he can't pass out of it and get someone else to, say, knock down the corner 3, then their offense is sunk.
You brought up Paul George. In the locker room last night after the game, we talked about it along with Eric Horn. Little disconcerting to see how patched up Paul George is. He had ice on every part of his body except the top of his head. How beat up is Paul George, and is that a concern going forward?
I think it would not be a bad idea to start thinking about load management with him. We saw him have that right shoulder injury. He was out for 3 games. Recently, it's been his left side taped up. He had kinesio tape on his left shoulder for a while now. You can see it on his leg as well. Last night, he had ice on his quad and his left shoulder. So he's played a ton of minutes, and being sore and worn down is, at this point in the season, is definitely predictable. But yeah, you need him to be fresh going into the playoffs. You need him to be shooting at his best. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to, because he's played games that are like 50 minutes, So maybe reining that back a little bit. Although that could hurt them down this stretch, you still need them to be fresh for the playoffs.
And what about the mercurial Russell Westbrook? Last night, it was Russ at his best again. He only takes 4 3-point shots, makes 2. One of his misses was a shot clock heave, where he had to shoot it. We've seen since the All-Star break, he's been shooting more threes. That's generally not a good idea. Last night, it was like he almost had to make him shoot the ball. He was really wanting to facilitate. That's generally a good idea, it paid. It worked out great for the Thunder. Is there any way to gauge on what Russell Westbrook's going to do game to game? I mean, because one game he won't shoot, the next game he might shoot 8 to 10 threes, and he always says, "I'm just reading the game."
Right.
I'm just reading the game, and sometimes that's true, but sometimes he lets other things, he lets frustration. The real miss he had last night was early in the 3rd quarter, and he just throws up a wild 3 for no good reason other than frustration.
Yeah.
What can we expect from Westbrook? Is with the season reaching the near the end and ready for the playoffs, do we think Russell might become more mentally strong in terms of bearing down and doing the things that he knows he needs to do to help this team win?
I think there's probably a good chance. first of all, expect the unexpected. I'm not going to pretend like I can get inside Russell Westbrook's head. I don't think anyone can. But we see him, even within a game, once he gets down to those crunch time moments, he really focuses in. Little things like he starts making all of his free throws suddenly. And so, you take that towards the end of the season, seems likely that he'll do a similar thing. But he also has games where they'll get down and he feels like he has to take the load onto his own shoulders, whether or not that's true. And that really, when Paul George was struggling, Russell Westbrook took a lot of that offense onto him. And then it starts looking like, when Russell shoots the ball a lot, they're not doing well. That's not necessarily the cause of that. It's more Paul George wasn't shooting well. Someone has to pick up the pieces. Really, the Thunder needs Paul George to play well in order to have a really good, cohesive offense, which is a problem in and of itself. But when Russell Westbrook can get other guys involved, like Steven Adams, kept going back to him, kept dishing it off to his bigs who were then facilitating, which was really nice to see last night. So if they can keep that going, and if he can see how well that's working and has that same mentality like he did last night, where, like you said, Barry, he really did seem like he had to have his arm completely twisted. Yeah, the shot clock had to be running down for him to be like, okay, I'll shoot. That could work really well for the Thunder.
You talked about he got the ball to other people who also then facilitated. The Thunder had 5 players with at least 3 assists last night, including Markieff Morris has 3 assists in 7 minutes. Adams has 3 assists. Jeremy Grant has 4. The ball really did move pretty well last night against one of the NBA's best defensive teams. Indiana's either first or second. I can't remember if they've ahead of Milwaukee or not. So it's a case of that was close to the Thunder at its best. But here's why they were at their best, in my opinion. Look at the minutes played. George, 39 minutes. Jeremy Grant, 37 minutes. Steven Adams, 35 minutes. Russell Westbrook, 37 minutes. Terrence Ferguson, 38 minutes, and a team-high plus 18 on the point differential. Billy limited the bench against Indiana. Noel, 13 minutes. Nader, 13 minutes. Markieff Morris, 7 minutes. And Schroeder, 21, which is fewer than he usually plays. That's the way it's going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Can the Thunder get by doing that here these last 2 weeks of the regular season? Under the context of, we've already talked about, Adams is worn out, Paul George is beat up. Of course, Westbrook's the bionic man. He's not, he can play 102 minutes, wouldn't bother him. But how does Billy Donovan, knowing they got to win as many games as possible, he also needs to rest these guys, but the bench just isn't what it needs to be. Those starters are going to have to play a bunch of minutes for the Thunder to be successful. How do you balance those two opposing truths?
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be game by game, because they do need to win those games. And really what needs to happen is these games that they're supposed to win, starters need to come out, really get ahead early so that they can rest late in the game. If they're not doing that, like they've made pretty much every game close, whether win or lose recently. And so when they're doing that, they're stuck playing 38 minutes a game, and they can't have that. And so it's really, the onus is on the starters to be able to come out, get early leads, let the bench just try to keep you there. Don't make them, they have kept the Thunder in games recently. Don't make them do that. Make them just hold the fort. You start out, get an early lead, which they did last night briefly, haven't been doing consistently at all, and then you can get a little more rest. But like you said, Billy Donovan is working towards shortening up those rotations. We saw him even go to just a 7-man rotation in the second half at Toronto. So he's working towards that, like you'd expect as they're getting towards playoffs, but they need to rest guys.
Here's the problem. Going through the schedule, last real blowout for the Thunder, February 7th over the Grizzlies. Now, they beat the Nets by 12, but they played terrible in the first half, trailed significantly at halftime, came back and took control of the game. But the last real blowout, we're talking 7 weeks. So this is not a team that's been dominating.
Yeah.
It's hard to rest the guys when that's the case. Hey, stay tuned for further Thunder coverage here on News OK. And every day in the Oklahoman, the Thunder coverage is brought to you by Maddie McMillans.